just go with the flow, talk in English, and I will translate in the chat box for the audience. And just one thing, I will translate this in Vietnamese a little. Audience will also notice that. Dạ thưa các anh chị, thì cho cái present của Catherine hơn thì thay dịch bằng tiếng Việt Catherine nói, thì song song là những cái thông tin bằng tiếng Việt. Dạ
ngắt quãng, nó hơi bị ngắt quãng ấy.
Dạ vâng, vậy em nói lại ạ. Dạ thưa các anh chị, thì thay vì mình sẽ dịch bằng tiếng Việt sau một đoạn khi mà Catherine nói bằng tiếng Anh, thì em sẽ đưa cái đoạn text bằng tiếng Việt ngay khi mà cô ấy nói bằng tiếng Anh ở trong đoạn chat. Như vậy thì cái đoạn chia sẻ nó sẽ không bị ngắt quãng. Và song song lúc đó thì các anh chị có câu hỏi nào ngay trong lúc mà mình chia sẻ, ngay trong lúc mà cô Catherine chia sẻ, thì các anh chị sẽ đưa ngay vào chat box, hoặc là các anh chị có thể bật mic lên để có thể tương tác cùng khán giả. Thì khi đó em sẽ interrupt lại với cô Catherine, và em cũng sẽ là người dịch trực tiếp với cô ạ. Okay, so about the technical is done. We will start to introduce our goals for the webinar first by our founder and CEO at HR Academy Vietnam, Đinh Thị Hồng Duyên. Hi Duyên, can you talk a little bit about your visions and introduce Catherine after that?
Yes. Xin chào các anh chị, rất vui được gặp các anh chị trong cái buổi webinar ngày hôm nay. Hi Catherine, it is our great honor and pleasure to warmly welcome you to our webinar today. Thank you so much, Catherine, for accepting our invitation and joining us as a keynote speaker. Thank you. Catherine is a global respected expert in workplace culture and the founder of Civility Partners. The company receives many awards such as Top HR Assessment Service Company, Best Full Service HR Consulting Firm, Top Executive Training Company. Oh, congratulations you. She has advised more than 250 organizations around the world, including NASA, Stanford University, and Chevron. She also LinkedIn learning instructor with over 2.8 million learners worldwide. A TEDx speaker and has been featured in Forbes, Time, NBC, and Bloomberg. Catherine is not only a thought leader, she is a leader with heart. We are so grateful to have her with us today. Now, without further ado, let's give a warm welcome to Catherine as she shares her insight, her knowledge with us. Thanks again, Catherine.
Thank you so much for having me. It is such an honor to be here, and I appreciate all of the work that you've put into getting this meeting together. So thank you for having me. So please, at any point, stop me and say we need a minute to translate, or we have a question, or what have you. I am here to make sure everybody gets what they need out of this time together. So thank you for that introduction. I'd just like to share a little bit about my experience. So I got interested in a toxic work environment and how to manage that because of my own experience. I was internal HR and worked with somebody who was pretty nasty. He was hard to work with and made life hard for lots of us. And as HR and as you see, that toxic behavior, I saw the cost to the organization and I saw the cost to people, myself included. And so I went to graduate school and ended up doing all of my research on toxic work environments. And so here we are all these years later. as the as was said, I have lots of courses on LinkedIn. I also have a new book coming out, Navigating a Toxic Workplace for Dummies. And so I'm going to apologize in advance for my cat. It's her witching hour, so she is all over my office. Hopefully she'll wander off. She's all around my feet right now. So I have a book coming out on June 26th, Navigating a Toxic Workplace for Dummies, and we'll share a QR code if you're interested in that. And over the years, I've served a huge array of clients. And so I have a lot of different experience. I've seen a lot of different things. I also wanted to mention, if you send us an email at info@civilitypartners.com, we will send you a few things, and we'll talk more about how those will be useful for you along the way. So let's go ahead and jump in. So we're going to talk about kind of global perspectives on workplace culture, and we'll talk about HR's experience, which we discussed a lot in preparation for this webinar, that your experience in Vietnam as an HR professional is similar to the US perspective, which is that HR is treated as transactional. HR is kind of looked upon to do payroll and compliance, and HR can really be and should be something so much more like the keepers of the culture in companies. And so we're here to talk about that. So I'd love in the chat, what are you doing in your organization right now to help your people feel good about work? So go ahead and put that in the chat, and then I know one of you will translate it for me.
Yes. Catherine muốn hỏi các anh chị là doanh nghiệp của các anh chị đang làm gì để khiến nhân viên cảm thấy vui khi mà đến nơi làm việc. Thì rất mong các anh chị có thể chia sẻ ở phần bình luận để Catherine có thể tư vấn lại thêm trong cái buổi chia sẻ ngày hôm nay. Yeah. We received the answers.
Flex working time. Rewarding good performers and behaviors. Ooh, clear business updates. I love that you put that, because I think a lot of times we don't think about that as a sort of value proposition for employees, but that is something we see a lot. Employees want more information than they're getting about the business. And so thank you for putting that in there. Expanding their contributions, work from home, sincere and truth, make them feel their values. Yeah. Benefits, support and coaching, team building, social programs, valuing their contributions. Okay, yeah, benefits are important.
We have some in Vietnamese, and
Yes.
I try to translate for you. Phan Thu Hồng, her company have a different clubs based on different interests of employee.
Okay.
This is interesting as well. We have GSTO Vietnam have community culture based on the core values, and everyone have the same language and apply the same core value every day.
Yeah, that having the same language is important in sharing the values. Okay. Constructive feedback. That's another good one. Another one that's a little out of the box in terms of company culture, making them proud of the company. Yeah. So my perspective on culture, and thank you all for sharing. My perspective on culture is that it's the way that your organization or your workforce understands the world around them, and then they behave as a result of that. So when organizations focus on the values and making sure people have shared language, and you're giving them feedback when they're, either performing or behaving in ways that go against the culture, then that's how you're going to get them to behave in the ways that you want them to behave, or that the organization needs for them to behave. So people, we have culture. Anytime people come together, a culture emerges, and people will behave in ways that they believe are going to be tolerated by that culture, and of course even rewarded by that culture. And so the organization has to continue sending consistent messages about what that behavior should look like, because people will behave in a way that matches their understanding of the culture around them. Of course, there's lots of research out there about toxic cultures, negative cultures, bosses that aren't great. So this is according to SHRM. Workers' top reasons for leaving a poor or terrible workplace culture include poor management, unfair treatment, insufficient regard for employee well-being, lack of empathetic leadership, and more pay. And there's tons of research like that. So when I think about culture, and I want to ask, this is the same slide, is that correct? Yeah, the Vietnamese version. Okay. So I'll put this one up. That's fine.
Catherine, could you share your slide?
Yeah. Catherine is sharing her screen. People can see Catherine screen now. Jen, don't worry.
Do you see it? Okay.
Yeah. Jen,
Okay.
you can stop it. Everyone is seeing Catherine's screen now.
Okay. So the way that over the last 16 years that I've been doing this, really looking at how culture forms, my perspective is that these three forces are what drive culture. So you have individual behavior. So if we all work together, the individuals I interact with every single day, that's going to give me information about the company culture and how to respond. And my individual behavior as a team member influences culture as well. Of course, managers, the behavior of each manager individually plays into culture, and so does the behavior of each individual top leader. The organization, and this is what's missed a lot, I think. A lot of times we really focus on people as that's the culture, just the people and how they behave. But what we see a lot is that organizational behavior is hindering the individual's ability to behave in the ways that the organization seeks. So, for example, if I want a high-performing culture and I expect all of my people to engage in high performance, as an organization, I have to define high performance. I have to put measures in place in performance management so that you can be measured on your ability to be a high performer. I have to put processes in place that ensure high performance. So the organization has to look at its own behavior and ask itself, how are we as an organization helping or hindering high performance, if that's the culture we want? And then, of course, leadership as a body also plays a role. So we also see a lot where organizations will say, we want, a civil culture, we want employee engagement, but then leadership isn't putting any resources towards that culture. Or in the case of workplace bullying, which is something, we coach leaders accused of bullying or creating a toxic environment, where they've been allowed to act that way for a long time. So leadership hasn't been playing their role in creating the right kind of a culture. So, for example, you can influence individual behavior through things like training, manager training, coaching, That's the things that organizations put in place to influence individual behavior. But then again, the organization has to have the right performance management in place. Their onboarding processes have to be well done. Recruiting, compliance, complaints, all of the things. And then leaders have to put budget and resources and allow HR the time to create the culture that they seek, and have to be communicating and being transparent about it. And so these three forces, when they're working together, they create a very strong workplace culture. When they're misaligned, then there is not a strong workplace culture, and that's when it can start to go toxic. So another opportunity to hear from you here. How do you guide employees when their behavior clashes with the company's values? So what happens when somebody is bullying or being uncivil? How do you manage that?
Các anh chị cảm thấy như thế nào nếu như mà những cái hành vi của lãnh đạo nó mâu thuẫn với cái giá trị cốt lõi của doanh nghiệp? Các anh chị có thể trả lời trong khung chat bằng cả tiếng Việt và tiếng Anh. Vì tiếng Việt thì em sẽ dịch sang tiếng Anh cho Catherine cùng nắm ạ. Yeah, they say disappointed when employee when their behavior clashes to the company values.
What else?
Yeah, like mất niềm tin. Sorry, like they will lose the trust. Some cook will say they will lose the motivation to work. Sometimes like they not realize that their behavior is clash. I think this is like they don't know like the code of conduct, then they will do the things is different to what they believe. They will lose their trust, and they will not believe in the same goals, and they will start to feel unmotivated and want to leave the company. Nga will say that they don't have the motivation to work.
Yeah. I'm hurting a few of these that I can read. Yeah, so and this is the thing is, like you said, a lot of times employees don't know that they're going against the culture, right? Nobody gets up in the morning, goes to work and thinks to themselves, I'm going to misbehave or disrupt, the team. Most of the time that's not intentional behavior. So that's why organizations have to be good with giving that feedback and training managers how to give that feedback. And like, the group coaching or individual meetings, or reminding them of the core value and then explaining how their behavior conflicts with it. So I think at least in the United States, giving feedback is something that a lot of managers are afraid of. Giving feedback in that performance conversation has a negative connotation. And I would assume it's like that around the globe. Not, just as humans, giving feedback is not really in our DNA. We want to make sure that everybody feels respected, and so it's a scary conversation. So I'm going to show you a case study. So this was a very toxic work environment we went into. And I'm going to show this first part. So looking at the top survey, our original survey 1, you can see that bullying was a huge problem. So on this survey, it was on a scale of 1 to 5, how often are you bullied? And 4 meant weekly. So a lot of people are saying, I feel bullied weekly in this organization. And also looking at this first survey, females felt more bullied than males who are white, and actually all other demographics. It was really females and the Black workforce were the two demographics that felt most toxic, or felt the workplace was most toxic. And so what we did is we created an action plan in partnership with them. And so we had 5 objectives ultimately on the action plan. These are 3 of them. And you know that you've probably seen action plans before, strategic plans. You know, you figure out what are we trying to do here, and then what are the steps that we're going to take to solve this. So when you put the list of action items that we implemented into our triangle here, you can see that a variety of everything we did, and there was a lot more, this is just some of what it was, falls in this triangle. And so if you look at any culture initiatives or anything you're doing as HR, it's all going to fall into one of these 3 areas, right? If you're hiring trainers, that's the individual side. If you're doing things for the organization, creating processes and so forth, that's the organization. And certainly we're all trying to convince our leaders to do the things we think they need to do for culture. So one thing that was interesting about this case study is some of this stuff was very simple. So this was at a university. And so the leaders this was a department in a university, the leaders at the top of this department were not interacting with the people, the employees. There was a real gap between the director level and the employee level. And so something simple was, hey, directors, why don't you start meeting with the people around you and get to know your employees so that they'll build a relationship with you and they'll tell you what's going on in their world before it explodes into some big toxic problem. The CEO of this department, you know, we did coffee with him. So he would go to different buildings and have coffee and donuts, and people could come there and ask him questions. And so these were kind of simple things that don't take a lot of time and money that really had a big impact on what was going on in the organization. We also did a ton of group coaching and training. We created a core competency matrix so that they could start measuring their employees and their leaders on certain behaviors. We actually rolled it out.
Sorry, Catherine, can I just
Yeah.
interrupt? Because in this slide, there's a lot of questions raised from our audience. For example, Trân.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, she said that she knows there's a program named Coffee with CEO, but it's just like a cliche when all of the C-suite, they sit together in the table and they talk with each other. They're not like they are in hierarchy. They think they are in a higher level.
Right.
And they don't really engage with employee. And
so that just to comment on that, this what they did. This was something different. So the CEO he would, you know, say, hey, everybody in this team, I'm going to be in your building on this day at this time, and I'm going to bring coffee and donuts. And the employee, I want you to come and talk to me. So he was, you know, getting to know employees who he'd never met before. He didn't even know a lot of the people who worked for him. So it was a chance for them to talk directly to the CEO, the employees.
Yeah, you say true, because as Trân say that CEO have to change the way they talk with employee. Also we have Dung Phạm. She wants to ask about sales space. Can you share some example about that?
Yeah. So the background of this organization is that they had some women come forward and say that they were being bullied and discriminated against, and that's how we ended up getting involved with them, or why they called us. And so as we unpacked And I'll go back to this one, and it's let me just refresh my memory. So for example, the members of the workforce who are Black, they felt more bullied, and sorry, I have to put this in the English one so I can speak to it. They had less trust in leadership, they had less engagement and job satisfaction. So you have the Black workforce feeling like it's not necessarily safe at work, right? They don't feel the same way that the white workforce feels, or the Latinos. And so the safe spaces was an opportunity for, and this was, the plan was created with what we call an action team, which is a group of employees from different levels within the organization. So this was one of the action team members' ideas, and it was meant to be kind of like, hey, come, the company paid for lunch in a certain, I can't speak. My cat's jumping from way up high. The company paid for lunch in a specific meeting room, and the idea was that anybody could come there and they could talk about the way they're being treated at work, and just kind of give each other tips and ideas. So, there's employee resource groups. It wasn't that. It was like, if you don't feel good at work, come here and to this lunch once a month, and we'll talk about it and give each other ideas about where to go from here and what to do. So that was what the safe spaces were.
Thank you for your sharing. I will try to type as fast as I can. So, chị Dung và mọi người, thì cái câu chuyện là cái nơi làm việc đó, những người da đen họ cảm giác họ không được tôn trọng như những người Hispanic, là những người Mỹ Latin hay là những người da trắng khác. Thì công ty đã mà mua những cái đồ bữa ăn để cho tất cả mọi người cùng ăn trưa chung và ngồi lại với nhau để cùng open và chia sẻ, thậm chí là chia sẻ thẳng luôn là tôi cảm thấy không được coi trọng, và mọi người cũng cùng nhau nghĩ ra những cái idea làm sao để cho những nhóm người da đen nó cảm thấy được coi trọng như những cái nhóm da trắng hay là những nhóm Mỹ Latin khác. Okay, I'm done with translating.
Yeah, all good. Other questions? I think I saw a question about the skip level.
Let me see. Yeah, I saw. Let me try to. Yeah. Một số cuộc họp về skip level, mostly for các cuộc họp về skip level thường trọng tâm vào việc gì để thay đổi hành vi. So about the skip level meeting, which priority we should focus to change the behavior?
I think all of it. So your first step is to figure out, what needs to change. So one of the reasons this whole coffee with the CEO and the skip level meetings were happening was because the survey results showed that people felt there was no transparency. They didn't, know the director or the CEO. So they were really relying on their mid-level manager to help manage the culture. But unless the mid-level managers know the expectation is to manage the culture and know how to manage the culture, then they're not going to do that very well. So the skip level meetings, actually, I'll say, out of everything we did for this organization, I think the skip level meetings, which is those meetings between directors and 2 or 3 levels below, that those were probably one of the most effective things that we did, and this so simple.
Chị có thể nhìn vào trong cái survey này thì chị sẽ thấy được là những cái điểm nào nó đang ở cao nhất. Em ví dụ như là mình sẽ thấy được cái điểm engagement đang là cái vấn đề lớn nhất. Thì khi mà mình xác định được là ok, engagement này đang là vấn đề lớn nhất thì mình sẽ tập trung vào cái vấn đề đó. Thì tương tự như vậy, job satisfaction là cái mức độ hài lòng về công việc, nó ở vị trí thứ 2 thì mình cũng sẽ tập trung vào đó. Hay là ở cái climate ethnic thì vào năm 2018 mình sẽ thấy.
So what we saw was that if you look at survey 2, that we were doing this concerted effort to change the culture really worked. So Bullying went down for everybody. Gender harassment went down. And the Black workforce, who previously, I'm going to use my arrow, they previously felt very differently about the organization. And then when you look at the second survey, we'd really been able to help them, feel more included in the culture. So all the work that we had done had a big impact for them. And then the other piece was for females. So females felt, again, more bullied. And they also had less trust in leadership. They were less engaged and so on. And after all of this work, we were able to even that out for females. So females and males felt less bullied. And females had developed more trust in leadership, and they were more engaged, and they had more job satisfaction. So one thing I suggest, this is kind of it's not easy, but it's a kind of an easy place to think of. I wish my cat would leave it alone. This is it's not an easy process, but I think it's a kind of a simple way to think of where can I get started. So I would choose one of your processes, and I'm using performance management for this example. But if you write in your core values, just pull up an Excel sheet, write your core values along the top, choose a process. In this case, it's performance management. And then just think through or brainstorm with whomever on your team, where are we already meeting the core values with this process, and where are we not meeting the core values? So then you can start to improve, right? So if, for example, innovation is one of your company core values, and you look at your performance management system, and your performance system is not necessarily innovative, it's the same as everybody else's performance system, then maybe it's time for you to figure out, how can we make innovation a part of performance, not just something we talk about in performance. So that's where that individual behavior and the organizational behavior have to come together. If you're going to measure your people on innovation, you also need to measure your performance management system on innovation. So this is something I really recommend you get started with. Just pick a process. Could be your onboarding process, your recruiting process, performance, your training programs. And just, again, ask yourself, where do they meet the core values and where do they don't? And this is, again, it's not, do we talk about the core values in these things? It's, does the organization, does the process itself live the core value in the way it behaves? So I'm curious about some personal barriers. So as we talked about earlier, leadership sometimes doesn't listen to HR, as brilliant as we are. Do you have barriers when you go to your leaders with your ideas around culture?
Câu hỏi của Catherine là có một cái rào cản cá nhân nào mà khiến cho các anh chị cảm thấy ngần ngại khi mà chia sẻ cái ý tưởng để thay đổi hay là cải tiến với ban lãnh đạo không? Các anh chị có thể chia sẻ những cái rào cản cá nhân đó khi mà các chị ngần ngại.
Tô bánh chanh hả? Tô bánh chanh.
Xuân chị Lan.
Chúng ta có thể chia sẻ lên ô chat có những cái rào cản cá nhân nào mà các bạn cảm thấy ngần ngại khi chia sẻ các cái ý tưởng cho người leader của mình. Share the idea and the leader don't like.
Yeah. They just say, nope, I don't like that. Yeah, the leader ignores. No changes, no action after I try to suggest some new ideas or solutions. Yeah. Whether the idea is bringing ROI. Yeah, so that's certainly a key component, is making sure that you're presenting your ideas in a way that shows ROI, or that there's a business case for it. They always reject in cap letters. They don't give feedback.
Mhm.
Yeah, this is the stuff that makes me sad. We see this so much. Already talk a lot, but no change. Leaders don't want to look at the reality, and they even don't understand. Yeah. And then past experiences, fear of judgment. What else is in there that I cannot read? CEO doesn't like it when we share a problem. Yeah. Yep. So leaders and CEOs are we see this all the time, and again, I think it's a global problem. The Society for Human Resources, which is the big global human resources association, they talk about this a lot too. So it does seem to be a global issue, and what we see is that HR is often viewed as transactional. And I've noticed there's something interesting about when you give a CEO feedback, it seems like they take it as a personal attack. And so I think, you're all saying they push back, they don't like it, I'm always ignored. And it's like, because we're the keepers of culture and people and their happiness. It's like, if you go to leaders and say, we need to do X, Y, and Z, or we need to improve this, it's like they take it as a personal attack, I feel like, instead of really taking in what needs to change. And so, when HR is ignored, these are the types of things that we see. I can tell you that some of our clients, just kind of talking about some of what we've seen, we had a client that had a real lack of psychological safety, and they were a construction company. And so people didn't feel safe stepping in when safety rules were being violated, because they didn't have that safety that they felt like they could do that. And they were particularly afraid of one individual who made threats, and nobody shared that with HR. And it wasn't until we came in and started hearing about the threats that, it's like, you need to do a workforce investigation. There is a problem here. People spend time gossiping and complaining. It's not a good place. And then I also think, let's not forget about you. This is your job, your identity. We get a lot of self-esteem from what we do at work. And if you're sort of constantly being told no, that's also not great for you either. Let's see, I'm proposing to build a culture of learning and training, but the leader said that not everyone can be trained. So my mood dropped. Yeah, the leader argues they need to see the evidence to prove that idea could lead to ROI without having any trial. Yeah, how can I prove to you this is going to work if you don't let me give it a try? And so you're being forced to go get evidence from some other company that's totally totally unrelated, for example. So you do, though, have to start thinking more about data and how you can lean on it to make your case. So one way to do that is to make the ROI, make the case, is maybe provide some assistance for you. The other option is to, let me switch. The other option is to think about, or you can just kind of do this on your own, pull up an Excel sheet and just think through what are the costs? So, for example, if you're wanting to build a culture of training and learning, using that example, spend some time thinking about the cost of not doing that. So if you're not, or if you're spending a lot of time coaching people who are having issues, you're spending a lot of time training, fixing work that people are doing because they're doing it wrong. You can put a cost to that, right? So you can figure out how much time, here's my salary, break that down into hourly. I've spent 50 hours on this in the last month, and so that's a cost. That's part of my salary going to solving this problem instead of doing the other things that are more important that I should be doing. How much time has been spent on X, Y, and Z. So you can, if you start to really brainstorm, you could probably start to figure out the costs of not doing your idea. So then you can go to your boss and say, this is how much this problem is costing us, and my solution is going to cost X amount to implement, but the ROI will be, this. Let me see. Bring up a new idea might mean that you'll be the one who takes responsibility to make the idea come true without any support. Yep. Yeah, you can be scary to present your thoughts because then you're the one who's going to be stuck implementing it for sure. There's some other, just kind of speaking of being able to prove things to the CEO. There is a ton of research out there on the internet about the ROI of a positive work culture. So these are just some of the statistics that we've come across. So, so whatever the initiative is that you're wanting to implement, whether it's creating a positive culture or a high performing team or whatever it is, there's probably research out there on the impact doing something like that had on other organizations that you could show. And then on the flip side, certainly you could say the costs of a toxic work culture are this, or the costs of not doing it are this. So employee engagement is, of course, a hot topic right now. There's tons of research from Gallup about the cost of not having engaged employees versus the benefit of having engaged employees. I just want to pause. Any thoughts or questions on this, on where we're at? Go ahead.
Yep. So, cô Catherine muốn hỏi mọi người là những cái phần mà chi phí khi mà một cái văn hóa doanh nghiệp độc hại á, ví dụ như là những chi phí mà phải thay thế nhân viên, thì mọi người có thường gặp phải không? Mọi người có thể chia sẻ cái tỷ lệ mà một năm mà cái số lượng mà nhân viên thường bị mất đi, và cái chi phí mà mình phải tập trung thay thế cho những nhân viên, ví dụ như là ở đây có 40% lương cho nhân viên cấp thấp này, 150% lương cho nhân viên cấp trung, hay thậm chí là lương mà dành cho nhân viên cấp cao, cái chi phí cũng rất là cao, hay là những cái chi phí mà phải mất do nhân viên bị mất gắn kết, thì mọi người có thể chia sẻ vào các đoạn chat, hay là những cái ảnh hưởng khi mà họ bị thiếu tôn trọng, ví dụ như là họ giảm cái nỗ lực làm việc, rồi họ không có gắn kết với tổ chức, thì những cái thiệt hại mà mọi người đang phải đối mặt như thế nào ạ? Ngoài ra thì mọi người cũng thấy là bên cạnh cái phần mà nhân viên bị ảnh hưởng á, thì chính cái doanh nghiệp họ cũng bị mất đi cái phần phần lợi nhuận, hay là ở đây đối với một cái công ty mà họ có như cái báo cáo của John Cotter, mình sẽ thấy được là cái giá trị của một công ty khi mà có văn hóa doanh nghiệp mạnh á, thì những cái lợi ích mà công ty nhận được. Để em đưa cái phần dịch vào cho mọi người đọc ạ.
Okay. I'm gonna show one other slide, and then I'd love to address, like, we can maybe do some specific questions that came through from the audience when they were registering. So these are some of your main key metrics that you should be keeping track of anyways, but then you can also use these to make your case. So if you can show that the retention rate is X, or the turnover rate is X, and it's costing us this amount of money, so definitely take a picture of this slide. This is another great action item for you. So so far, right out of the gate, right after this webinar, you can start looking at these metrics, pull them up, and start figuring them out. And I would definitely, again, start auditing some of your processes against the core values. And I kind of joke that HR has to be a ninja. So while your leader may not listen to your ideas about all the wonderful changes you want to make to your onboarding program, for example, or to your learning and development program, you can start influencing the culture of the organization by influencing the organization's behavior through your role as HR. So you can probably make some adjustments, at least, to start moving the company in the right direction. And that's a great question you've listed there. Which of these metrics are you tracking, and what are you missing?
Người có thể gõ vào cái đoạn chat, ví dụ như là ở đây mình có 7 cái metric để mình đo lường được những cái chỉ số quan trọng, thì ở đây có những cái chỉ số nào mà công ty của mình đang theo dõi, và những cái chỉ số nào mà mình không có thực sự chú trọng. Vì mình không thể đánh giá được thực sự cái thực tế cho những thứ mà mình không thể đo lường được. Do vậy là để đánh giá được cái thực trạng văn hóa doanh nghiệp thì mình phải đo lường được những chỉ số nào. I will translate to them that we cannot understand what we can measure. So we need to okay, we have Dung, the percentage of volunteering rate, and then she asked how to evaluate the engagement score of employee.
So you would, if you're not doing any sort of employee engagement survey, that's what that refers to. So you would want you want to start doing employee engagement surveys. You actually want to be doing culture surveys, which I'll talk about shortly. A quick way to measure engagement, if you don't have the budget or ability to do a workforce survey, is what's called the NPS score, Net Promoter Score. So you could send out one question that says, would you recommend us as a good place to work? Yes or no? And that's your score. So obviously, the more people saying they would recommend you as a good place to work, the more engaged they probably are. It's not a specific correlation, but that's the easiest way to gather if people are engaged or not. But you may want to consider doing an employee survey. And that's also going back to producing research and ROI for your leaders. If you can get them to let you do a workforce survey, then you have actual data from your workforce where you could say, hey, X% of people wouldn't recommend us as a good place to work. We've got 20% turnover rate. Other indicators are not tracked, but the most lacking is the internal promotion rate, because the leadership positions are almost fixed when the company has no direction to expand its business areas. Yeah, and I hear you. And internal promotion rate, or if you're a small company, maybe there's no room for promotions. So if you're in a larger company, it's certainly easier to measure internal promotion rate, but maybe you could adjust it a little bit and look at how work is divided. So for example, I'm a small company. There's only five of us that are kind of the core main people working at Civility Partners. Jenny is one of them who's here on the webinar with me. There's no place for Jenny to go. She's not going to get promoted because we're so small. But if I just kind of thinking about whether or not she's engaged and what I can do for her, the more challenges I give her, the more she steps up, the more her role evolves with the needs of the business. I think those are the kinds of things you can be looking at, especially if you're in a small business where there isn't an opportunity to get promoted. How can we measure the diversity goal or rate for employees? So what you want to do is take a look at, and so I'll talk about leadership specifically, and then we can expand it. So if you look at your leadership team and it's all men, then you could say, by the end of 2026, we have a goal for there to be a woman on the leadership team. So that's what it is. It's just, or hey, our workforce is not diverse. And by the way, having a lack of diversity in your workforce is a risk factor for harassment and bullying, because the underrepresented groups, if you do have some other people there who are not like the main group, that they're more likely to be harassed and bullied. So it is an important thing to measure. So you could look at your workforce and say, well, 90% of our workforce is whatever the demographic is, and we want to make sure that we get that to 80% so that we're filling in more roles with other diverse groups of people. Let's see. The company I'm working for doesn't have any of these metrics. And, again, I think you don't necessarily need permission to measure these things, right? Just as HR, these are things for you to know. So I feel like you don't necessarily need permission. At least, what's the saying? It's easier to ask for forgiveness than permission. So you can start measuring things. And then for some of you who said earlier, I'm just constantly ignored when I'm asking about implementing initiatives, you can start showing data like this, and you can say, well, hey, I've been tracking, these things, and the scores right now are showing that we are not performing very well, or we're not giving employees what they need. So measure them anyway. I'm a bit of a rebel, though. Let's see. The indicators we measure include employee engagement, voluntary turnover rate. Okay, can you share more about the engagement scoreboard? Yep. So I'm going to give you a long answer to your question. So one of the things that Civility Partners does is we do climate surveys. So you can find vendors who only do engagement surveys. An engagement survey will measure levels of engagement. So we do a climate assessment, which means that we're looking at more than just engagement. So our climate assessment looks at employee engagement, job satisfaction, internal communication, inclusion, and relationships. And you can see some examples of some of the types of statements that the employees are being asked to rate. So again, if you want to do a simple engagement survey, you could ask how inspired, rate the extent that you're inspired to do your best work every day. And would you recommend us is a good place to work. So the word engagement is really about enthusiasm. Gallup is the company that's really cornered that market on engagement surveys, and that's how Gallup defines engagement, is enthusiasm for the work. So the engagement score does, generally need to be an actual workforce survey. But if you don't have the budget for that, you can ask some simple questions. Maybe you can get permission to you yourself send out, a very short survey to get an idea of engagement. Let's see, to get the final employee engagement index, I evaluate it based on my criteria, such as internal activities, colleagues, physical environment, level of support, connection. I'd love to hear more about that. Is it 2? I'd love to hear more about what else you're doing. Sounds like you found a way to measure engagement. I find that working with female leaders develops more expertise than working with males. I agree with you. Let's see, what else? So there are more male leaders than female leaders in my department, but this is the nature of departments. Yeah, mostly have only male employees. Setting goals like this is not feasible. Yeah, having a diversity goal is a little bit of an ethical conundrum, because one could say, well, these are the people that I have to choose from. How is it fair if I go off and create a goal that we want to make the workforce 20% women? I don't know. And also, you may live in a place that doesn't have a lot of diversity. We hear about that in the United States too, where it's like, if you live in a rural community, where are you going to go and get people who are diverse? So I would say, if setting goals isn't feasible, the answer to your question about what should you do, the answer is keep it top of mind. When you're filling positions, keep that top of mind. Is there any biases that are keeping women out, that are affecting your decisions? So that's really all you can do. If you're not able to really set a goal, keep it top of mind, and you get what you focus on, right? So if you start focusing on it, it'll start to manifest.
Sorry, let me try to translate in Vietnamese. Có những cái sự thật đấy là mình phải chấp nhận là đối với một số công việc thì nó phù hợp với người nam hơn là người nữ. Tuy nhiên là để thay đổi cái phần matrix này thì mình cũng sẽ cố gắng mình lưu ý thôi, là nếu như mà mình nhìn thấy giữa những cái sự đối xử bất công hay là tham chức thì nghĩa là mình sẽ lưu ý cái phần này khi mà điều đó xảy ra. Yeah. Okay, I think I'm done with translating. You can go ahead.
Okay. So I just wanted to share a little bit about what we do, and then we'll have some time for additional questions. So Civility Partners does 4 things. We do workforce surveys, as we just discussed, the climate assessments. We work with clients to then figure out, what do you do with that information and what can you do to create change? We do a lot of training programs, and as I mentioned earlier, we specialize in coaching for leaders who have been accused of bullying or creating a hostile work environment or being toxic. And so a lot of times those leaders are high value because they bring a lot of results, and so we're able to coach them. So again, in terms of our assessments, we are measuring 5 things. If you do an engagement survey, you're measuring engagement, but looking at culture. So it's really important to understand, are people satisfied? Are they enthusiastic and engaged? Do they get communication in a timely manner? Do they feel included? And what are their relationships like within their own teams? And then, so you saw this slide already. So then we, again, in terms of what that looks like, once we have the data, then we can work with the organization to say, what do we do now? What's your plan? And so we do planning sessions with the organization. And the goal is to create an action plan that can be published to the workforce so that the workforce understand or can see the transparency and sort of measure what's happening within the organization. Something else that I cannot stress enough is that your managers need training on how to manage culture. And I just don't see a lot of that out there in the world. Managers may get training on how to delegate, how to hold people accountable to performance. There's a lot of courses out there around kind of being a leader when you're a manager. But really and truly, it's really important that your managers get training on how to create and sustain the work culture, whatever that culture is. So for example, if your goal is to teach managers how to manage a positive work environment or team culture, then the types of courses you might offer. And so what we do is we call it a manager evolution lab. It's 6 courses. There's exercises in between each course. And so for us, a manager evolution lab looks like this: how to develop psychological safety, how to set expectations, how to give and receive feedback, how to coach employees, how to build a positive team culture, and then how to hold people accountable for the right performance and behavior. So that's an example of the types of things that we're doing. Managers just don't get the right training. I just don't see that they get that. We also, as I mentioned, we coach leaders accused of bullying or creating a toxic environment. Myself and all of my coaches were all certified in a coaching methodology created by a woman called Dr. Laura Crashaw, and she has been doing research on this particular group of leaders for a long time. And over time, she figured out exactly the method to follow to give these individuals an opportunity to make change. And so coaching is one of my favorite things to do. And then we also do conflict resolution. We often get calls to help a group of leaders who don't get along or 2 people who don't get along. So that's a little bit about what we do and how we help organizations make change. So I'm going to put this slide up. If you wanted to order the book, there is a QR code there, and it'll take you to a web page where you can order the book. And I'll just stop again and see if there's questions or anything. I know there was a lot of questions that came through. Is there something I haven't addressed yet that we want to make sure we talk about? Yeah, conflict isn't a problem. It's unmanaged conflict. That's for sure. Conflict's good. Disagreements are good. It's when it goes unresolved that's a problem. Any other, let's get some of those questions that came through.
Thank you, Catherine. I think this is all of your prepared slide. So now I think we can come to the most exciting part of our sections. Các anh chị, bây giờ mình có thể đến thẳng vào những cái Q&A mà mọi người có thể bật camera hoặc là bật mic lên để có thể nói chuyện với Catherine. Mọi người có thể nói bằng tiếng Việt, em có thể dịch sang tiếng Anh. Catherine, I remember that we already have a list of questions we collected from our audience before this webinar happened.
Yeah.
I think this is in the next slide. Can you just move ahead? We have two Lan. Raise her hand. Yep. Chị Lan, chị có thể đặt câu hỏi để em có thể dịch ra tiếng Việt ạ.
Em chào mọi người ạ. Mọi người có nghe được em nói chưa ạ?
Dạ có.
Dạ vâng chị ơi. Với
Oh,
phần
sorry.
này thì em có một câu hỏi ạ, nhờ chị có thể chia sẻ giúp em ạ. Đấy là khi mà làm văn hóa ấy, thì mình cần tập trung vào cái nhóm đối tượng đấy là quản lý, bao gồm cả quản lý cấp cao và quản lý cấp trung. Tuy nhiên là đối với bên em thì có một thực tế là đội ngũ quản lý cấp trung là cầu nối giữa ban lãnh đạo và nhân sự, nhưng mà lại chưa thật sự để tâm đến yếu tố văn hóa. Tức là chưa thật sự đi đầu trong các hoạt động văn hóa, cũng như là chưa hiểu rõ mục đích là cần làm văn hóa để làm gì, hay là làm văn hóa như thế nào để làm gương cho đội ngũ nhân sự ở dưới ạ. Và để khắc phục cái vấn đề này thì bên em có tập trung đẩy vào đào tạo cho đội ngũ nhân sự cấp trung rồi. Tuy nhiên là cái việc đào tạo này nó chưa tạo ra được cái active thật sự đối với đội ngũ này ấy. Thì em muốn hỏi là mình có cái phương án nào hay mình có cái active nào để tạo ra hiệu quả rõ ràng hơn không ạ?
Okay, thank you for your questions. Chị nghĩ là câu hỏi này chị sẽ đưa cho cả hai, chị sẽ đưa cho cả Catherine và đưa cho cả chị Duyên để chị Duyên có thể tư vấn thêm cho em về phần này. Ví dụ như Catherine có thể chia sẻ cho em về phần cái cách mà phía ở bên Mỹ họ làm như thế nào, và sau đó thì chị Duyên sẽ chia sẻ ở Việt Nam thực tế là như thế nào ha. Cảm ơn em đã đặt câu hỏi.
Vâng ạ.
Catherine, thank you. Catherine, I think this question should be delivered to two of you guys, you and Duyên as our CEO. But first, I will ask you first, so we will have the global perspective, and then Duyên will localize it into Vietnam. So Lan question was, her company is trying to build the company culture, and there are two main focus group to implement this company culture. The first one is the C level, and the second one is the middle level people. But the problem is the middle level has not really taken the lead and has not really like understand truly the company culture is about and what does this for, and then they not trying to become the example for the lower level. So they also try, like land company also try to bring the middle level to training, but still facing the problem they not really adopted this value. So what should she do, and what should the company do?
Great question. Great question. I think the first thing you have to look at is what would motivate a manager to make change. So if you send them to training, but there's no reward on the other side for living out whatever they learned in the training, then why would they adjust, right? Adjustments and change is hard. So one option is motivate them through, for example, measuring them on their ability to have a positive team culture. If you're doing a survey, for example, you could hold each manager accountable to a certain score. So you have to find ways to motivate them to care. Otherwise, why would they do it? The other piece of that is, I've noticed a lot of times you have to sell a problem before you can sell a solution. So I wonder if those managers just don't understand why this is important. So again, why would they put effort toward it? So you may want to backtrack a little bit and talk to them about the problems that you're trying to solve with them going to training and adjusting their behavior. And that could be as simple as having conversations with them. Hey, what problems are you facing with your team? And then when they start sharing their problems, you say, well, one way to solve those problems is by implementing the things that you learned in the training program. So those are my two pieces of advice. Make sure there's a motivation to make change, and also make sure they understand. You're on mute.
Chị Duyên ơi.
Okay. I'm sorry. I will speak in Vietnamese, and Ngọc Anh will help you to translate into English. Lan ơi, thực ra cái câu hỏi của em nó cũng sẽ tương tự như rất nhiều cái câu hỏi của mọi người liên quan đến chuyện là làm như thế nào để mình thay đổi được cái hành vi của đội ngũ cán bộ của mình từ cái hành vi A chuyển sang hành vi B. Ví dụ như hành vi hiện nay bây giờ họ không nhiệt tình với các hoạt động văn hóa doanh nghiệp, hoặc là truyền tải các cái giá trị của văn hóa doanh nghiệp cho cho nhân viên, và bây giờ mình muốn thay đổi cái hành vi đó để họ nhiệt tình với các cái hoạt động về văn hóa doanh nghiệp. Thì để người ta có thể chuyển đổi từ một cái hành vi từ một cái hành vi này sang một hành vi kia thì nó phải có 6 cái yếu tố. Nó sẽ cần 6 cái yếu tố. Thứ nhất là một cái yếu tố liên quan đến môi trường bên ngoài, và môi trường bên ngoài này nó gồm có 3 cái yếu tố con là thông tin. Thứ nhất là người ta có được biết rõ đâu là hành động đúng và đúng với văn hóa và có được nhắc nhở hàng ngày hay không. Thì cái này nó giống như chuyện là khi mà chúng ta có cái bộ giá trị cốt lõi ấy, thì từ cái bộ giá trị cốt lõi đó chúng ta phải xây dựng thành cái bộ quy tắc ứng xử ở bên trong doanh nghiệp của mình, và sau đó thì sẽ nhắc nhở mọi người xem là thường xuyên phải thực hiện theo. Cái thứ hai là họ có đủ nguồn lực để thực hiện cái điều, họ có đủ công cụ, đủ thời gian để quyền hạn để thực hiện cái điều đó không. Ví dụ như trong trường hợp chúng ta đang thúc đẩy cái việc mà sáng tạo ấy ạ, thế nhưng máy móc ở trong công ty của chúng ta nó quá tệ, thành ra mọi người muốn làm cũng không thể làm được, thì cái vấn đề mà không đủ cái nguồn lực ấy nó sẽ ảnh hưởng đến cái cách thức mà người ta vận động, người ta thực hiện. Cái thứ ba thì nó sẽ liên quan đến cái incentive, tức là cái khen thưởng, ghi nhận. Mình có những cái cơ chế thi đua khen thưởng ghi nhận khi mà người ta làm tốt hơn hay không, hoặc là nếu như có cái sự tôn vinh hay không, để cho người ta thấy rằng đó là một cái hành vi mà người ta nên hướng tới. Thì đó là 3 cái yếu tố liên quan đến môi trường. Còn cái yếu tố mà liên quan đến cá nhân ấy, đến cái người mà thực thi ấy, thì người ta đầu tiên là người ta có đủ cái kiến thức và cái kỹ năng để có thể thực hiện được việc đó không, họ có được đào tạo đúng cách để làm cái việc đó, và mà hay là họ chỉ biết nghe nói thôi mà họ không biết cách thức để làm như thế nào. Cái thứ hai thì nó sẽ liên quan đến cái capacity, cái năng lực của họ ấy, là cái năng lực của họ thì cái hành vi đó nó có bị quá sức so với họ hay không, và nhất là với những cái người mà có thể là có tuổi một chút, hay là những cái người mà người ta hơi khó để thực thi những cái việc như vậy, già rồi không đủ sức để chạy đua theo lớp trẻ để có thể dùng AI một cách thường xuyên hay như thế nào đó. Và cái thứ ba nó sẽ liên quan đến cái việc là người ta có động lực để làm không, cái lý do vì sao người ta phải làm cái điều này, làm cái điều này thì có lợi gì cho người ta. Và cái người nhân sự của chúng ta thì chung quy thì người ta sẽ làm cái gì nếu người ta cảm thấy là có lợi. Thế thì cái motivation này nó là một trong những cái quan trọng để cho thúc đẩy cho cái nhân sự người ta có thể thay đổi từ hành vi này sang hành vi khác. Như vậy là nếu như mình rà soát mà mình thấy chưa đủ được 6 cái yếu tố này ý, thì dường như nó sẽ kìm hãm cái hoạt động để người ta có thể điều chỉnh hành vi một cách hợp lý. I will say the BEM model, the BEM model is help to train it helps to train the attitude, the people attitude when they communicate about the culture.
Mm-hmm.
So what Duyên basically shared, where she said that there are 6 key factors to change the behavior of one person. They divide to 2 different components. 3 first factor is focused about the environmental factor. As I share, like it is behavior aligned with organization code of conduct. The second is do they have a necessary tool, time, and resource to perform these behaviors? For example, if the company wants the innovation culture, but they have outdated equipment, could be a barrier. The third is the system. It is the system recognize that actually there's regard for improvement. And meanwhile, there's the 3 personal factor. there's personal limitations. And the second is the capacity. For example, the old people or the old employee of the company, they face the challenge of using AI. So it is really hard for them to do because it's a limited capacity. And also the last but not least is the personal motivations. Like when the people truly want to change in deep inside them, there's nothing can be a barrier for them. So yeah, it's what Duyên has shared.
And you can see, I'll just follow up on that. You can see how the list of 6, falls within the triangle we looked at earlier. We're talking about the individual behavior and how the organization behaves. So the organization has to deliver the capability, provide the right tools and resources, and evaluate if are we rewarding these people. That's all the organizational piece. And then the individual piece are people, do they not know how? Have you communicated that it's expected of them to behave this way? Are they measured on it? And once they start implementing the behavior you're asking of them, then you can start to see who's doing it well, who's not doing it well, and who needs coaching so that they can go down this path.
Thank you for your sharing. Can you move to the next slide? Because
Yeah.
I remember there's more questions. Yeah, there's a question for you from our relations. Like, according to Catherine Mathis, what is the most common mistake a company make when they are trying to be positive culture? How can Vietnamese company avoiding them?
I can tell you the single most common mistake is that companies ask people to do things and they don't look at themselves. So, delivering training is a great example. Here, everybody, we want you to go to this training, and hopefully everybody's behavior will change after they've been to the training. We get that question all the time. Can you do training on X? Well, why? What's the problem you're trying to solve? And it's some big problem that can't be solved with training. So that is the single most common mistake, is that employers ask employees to do things, make changes, and don't take a look at themselves. An example of that is work-life balance, that employers will say, hey, our employees are burned out. Let's implement programs to help them not be burned out. But those programs are all sort of ancillary and focused on the individual. If people are burned out, the organization has to say to itself, what are we doing or not doing that causes burnout? Do we ask people to do more work than they're capable of? Are we allowing negative behavior or toxic behavior? What does the organization do that causes burnout? And you solve that before you ask employees to go and avoid being burned out. That's my answer. And I can answer these 2 questions that I see here pretty quickly. Discipline, rules, and sanctions be applied to integrate cultural behaviors? Yes, they should. So behavior is a performance problem. So if an employee is constantly making mistakes, what do? You give them some coaching, try to help them avoid making mistakes, and then eventually it becomes a disciplinary process. Like, look, if you make this mistake again, we're going to have to give you a formal write-up or let you go. And it's the same for toxic behavior that goes against your cultural values. So, we want everybody to be innovative or high performer or respectful. And we're going to give you some coaching to help you get there. And then if you can't, then we start using. And then the second, what are the key indicators of a successful corporate culture development project? We love survey data. So the short answer is survey data, that you've asked employees about the culture, and then you've made adjustments, and then you resurvey, and you can see that your surveys results are different.
We also have a new question from Tuyên Hồ. You can read it out loud and you can answer it.
Sorry, what are the effective methods for connecting and aligning our other leaders beyond HR to ensure they collectively embody and promote our company culture? You have to involve them. So going back to my, let me get back to that slide real quick. Going back to this slide where I suggested you sort of audit your HR processes against company core values. This is an exercise that you could ask other leaders to do within their own departments. So asking the accounting department, where do they live the core values or not? So again, that big mistake is that we have core values and we ask people to behave in a certain way, and we ignore whether or not the company is behaving that way itself. So if leaders are auditing their processes against the core values, then what happens is the organization starts to live the core values itself, and naturally people will live the core values. So you have to find ways to get their buy-in, of course. You have to find ways to get them involved and excited about it. And some of that may be selling them on the data, the ROI. Some of it may be, you have to find out what's going to motivate them to get involved and to care.
Trân, do you have any advice for these questions?
Thực ra với cái câu hỏi này thì cơ bản là mình làm như thế nào để có thể biến những cái giá trị cốt lõi đó trở thành những cái tiêu chuẩn quản trị chung. Thì cái tiêu chuẩn quản trị chung đó thì nó sẽ có những cái liên quan đến gắn cái văn hóa với cái trách nhiệm của cái người lãnh đạo cụ thể. Họ sẽ phải là cái người chịu trách nhiệm trong cái phần liên quan đến dẫn dắt ở đội ngũ, và có những cái tiêu chí rất là cụ thể ở trong các cái hệ thống quản trị và đánh giá, cũng như là đặt ra những cái tiêu chuẩn trong cái quá trình mình tuyển dụng con người. Ví dụ như trong trường hợp mà mình đã quyết định rằng văn hóa doanh nghiệp nó sẽ là gồm có 3 chữ T, tâm, tín, tài, thì có nghĩa rằng là toàn bộ các cái hoạt động của doanh nghiệp nó sẽ gắn liền với 3 cái chữ đó. Khi mà tuyển dụng thì một trong những cái giá trị mà mình cần những cái người tham gia vào doanh nghiệp của chúng ta thì nó cũng sẽ phải có cái bộ NDA đó, là có cái chữ tâm, đặt cái chữ tâm lên đầu. Và tất cả những cái mà cái cơ chế quản trị của mình ấy, là từ lúc xây dựng cái bộ tiêu chuẩn năng lực ấy, để làm rõ ra là mỗi lần chúng ta có một cái thay đổi gì, hay là liên quan đến lương thưởng, liên quan đến bổ nhiệm, liên quan đến những cái cơ chế chính sách khác ấy, thì nó đều gắn với những cái văn hóa doanh nghiệp. Thì ngoài cái việc mà chúng ta đang tổ chức các cái hoạt động về team building hay những cái hoạt động mà bế nổi ra, thì cái cơ chế chính sách ấy, nó phải đồng hành đi cùng để nó đảm bảo rằng là mọi người đều phải tuân thủ theo những cái quy định đó, và nó thành cái tiêu chuẩn quản trị ở bên trong của doanh nghiệp.
She's typing away.
Yeah, I try to translate in English for use. And also try to recap it in Vietnamese.
All good.
So let's move.
I'm looking at some of the other questions that came through, and we really did try to answer most of them during the presentation. So I think these questions I addressed in the presentation. I just kind of wanted to look at what else we have. Can Catherine share specific people analytics tools that Civility Partners has implemented to optimize talent management? I actually cannot speak to that. We haven't done any real talent management with our clients, so I don't have an answer. But it looks like, Dr. Dwin, you have a question around AI development here.
Duyên, there's a question for you. Yeah.
About AI affect the culture. I think this time many companies use AI in improve the quality and the effectiveness of everything, every work in but
Chị có thể trả lời bằng tiếng Việt, em có thể dịch sang tiếng Anh cho Catherine.
Khi cô Catherine hỏi về cái ứng dụng của AI ở bên trong doanh nghiệp, thì đến cái thời điểm hiện tại chúng ta cũng nhìn thấy là trong các cái doanh nghiệp và ở khá nhiều những cái tập đoàn lớn ấy, họ bắt đầu đưa cái Gen AI, tức là người ta đã có thể set up các cái AI để phục vụ riêng cho từng các cái mảng công việc, và với cái hoạt động đó thì nó có thể tối ưu được cái nguồn lực từ 30 cho đến 50%. Và đó cũng là cái lý do mà hiện nay bây giờ ấy, cái việc mà đặt hàng các cái chương trình đào tạo và đưa các cái chương trình về AI ở trong doanh nghiệp, nó gần như là trở thành điểm nóng của cái hoạt động đào tạo ở bên trong doanh nghiệp. Họ sẽ sẵn sàng gạt đi các cái chương trình đào tạo khác để tổ chức cái chương trình đào tạo AI để giúp cho người lao động nâng cao năng suất lao động. Tuy nhiên khi mà ứng dụng AI vào thì nó vấp phải một vấn đề là giữa cái về thực chất AI nó sẽ giúp cho chúng ta ở cái phần ở giữa, còn cái phần đầu là cái input của chúng ta vào, và cái phần ra, cái kết quả đầu ra là cái output, thì chúng ta đều phải kiểm soát lại. Chúng ta phải có đủ cái chuyên môn để chúng ta có thể đặt ra những cái đầu bài đúng, để khi mà nó đưa vào trong AI thì AI nó sẽ chạy ra những cái kết quả phù hợp và chuẩn. Còn đến khi mà AI đã chạy ra các kết quả ra ấy, thì lúc đó chúng ta lại phải kiểm soát lại cái phần kết quả đó. Thế nên nếu như chúng ta chỉ FOMO chạy theo cái là đẩy mạnh cái đưa AI vào mà bỏ qua cái câu chuyện là nâng cao cái năng lực thực tế của đội ngũ, thì lúc đó nó có thể tạo ra những cái sản phẩm mà với cái chất lượng không đồng đều, hoặc cái chất lượng mà nó chưa phù hợp. Và cái văn hóa nó có thể sẽ bị ảnh hưởng bởi cái đưa AI vào ấy, thì lúc đó thay vì cái câu chuyện là chúng ta chỉ cái quản trị đội ngũ nhân lực, thì hiện nay bây giờ chúng ta đang quản trị chúng ta quản trị cả AI, chúng ta đang quản trị cả một cái đội ngũ mà được gọi là gig, là đội ngũ thuê ngoài, hoặc là những cái người mà những cái đối tượng mà có thể làm thêm, hoặc là những cái người có thể nghỉ hưu rồi. Và như vậy là cái việc mà quản trị của cái người làm nhân sự nó sẽ trở nên phong phú hơn, và nó sẽ cần đặt ra rất nhiều những cái tiêu chuẩn hơn, những cái tiêu chuẩn liên quan đến bảo mật, những cái tiêu chuẩn liên quan đến đạo đức trong cái việc ứng dụng công nghệ và sử dụng AI một cách hợp lý. Thì đó chính là cái liên quan đến việc là AI hiện nay bây giờ đang tác động như thế nào đến các doanh nghiệp. Không thể có thể tóm lại là một là nó có thể thừa nhận rằng AI đang giúp tăng năng suất lao động lên rất cao. Nhưng bên cạnh đó thì cái việc chúng ta sử dụng thế nào cho hiệu quả thì nó liên quan trực tiếp đến cái phần chuyên môn của mọi người, đến cái phần chuyên môn của người lao động, và cái này bắt buộc người lao động phải càng ngày càng nâng cao cái năng lực của mình lên, bởi vì AI nó sẽ không thay thế con người, mà chỉ có những người biết sử dụng AI thì sẽ thay thế những người không biết sử dụng, bởi vì họ có khả năng làm nhiều hơn và làm tốt hơn những người khác. Và cái thứ ba thì nó sẽ liên quan đến câu chuyện là quản trị ở bên trong doanh nghiệp, nó sẽ quản trị con người, quản trị AI và quản trị cái lực lượng outsource ở bên ngoài, lực lượng gig, lao động gig. Và cái thứ tư thì nó sẽ liên quan đến cái vấn đề bảo mật và cái đạo đức trong sử dụng công nghệ. Thì có 4 vấn đề mà mình có thể
can't just say culture has to be this way and then not put budget toward it. So how do you cultivate a strong culture with minimal budget? And I go back to my joke about being an HR ninja. In HR, we have to find ways to do the things we know that need to be done with or without a budget. And a budget's great, so you can do all of the things that need to be done. But there are a lot of things HR can be doing to improve the culture without a budget. If part of your job is onboarding new hires, part of your job is recruiting new hires, you can be adjusting the culture through that process. You can be, with the audit of your processes, as I mentioned earlier, you can look at your own processes within your purview, figure out where they live the core values and where they don't, and adjust the adjust the processes to meet the core values without a budget, for the most part, right? Not everything, but that's the answer. It's just something I see all the time, and the answer is to just do your best with what you have to work with. And then the other question was around, you have a good culture already because of the business owner, but the leadership team has closed thinking and doesn't want to accept new things. What can be done? And the answer is that the owner has to make it clear that open-mindedness is required and recognizing it's going to take some time. So the business owner could, could in short, I guess, say, we all need to be more open-minded. I'm going to start requiring that we do that. And I want to understand why you're not open-minded, and let's get you some coaching to help you build that open-mindedness. So the leader has to require that they're more open-minded, and then provide the tools and resources to help this team develop that ability to be open-minded. And then to someone's question earlier, a year from now, 2 years from now, if somebody's still not open-minded, then you start disciplining them and invite them to go be closed-minded at a different organization.
Yeah, we have we have 2 more questions from me. Can you see?
Yep. And then I do have to hop off. I have to get my kids to school, so I'll finish. Oh, that's okay. Okay, so one question is, what is the role of a corporate culture handbook in building culture, and at what stage should it be developed? Well, here in California, where I live, HR or laws are heavy. The employers are heavily regulated in California, so you should have a corporate culture handbook as soon as you have an employee. So the handbooks can help build company culture, I think, if they're written in the right way. So at least here, the handbooks I see are very compliance focused. They're almost written like a legal document, because the employer doesn't want to be at risk. I think you can still have a corporate handbook, but have it be written in such a way that it's focused on your culture or sounds like your culture. And you can create a culture book that has your core values, that talks about what behavior looks like within each of those core values, the things that individuals can do every single day to build the culture So you can absolutely use corporate handbooks and culture handbooks to help build your culture. I wouldn't say it's the most important part of building culture. It's a tool and can be useful. But if you're going to ask me, how important a culture handbook is, I'm going to say on a scale of 1 to 10, it's probably about a 5. It's more about the behavior, right, than what's written down. Corporate culture should be rooted in the company's history and development. Each core value in the company culture should be accumulated from specific past activities and proven over time. The core values should be reviewed annually to update or adjust them according to business strategy and actual operations. Is this approach appropriate? I agree with the second part, that core values should be reviewed and adjusted. I don't necessarily agree that values should be rooted in the company's history or from specific proven activities. The way that we create core values is by asking the current workforce, how do you want to be treated at work? And then we take the data from that question and move it into themes, and from there we write core values. So I think core values should be rooted in what your current employees want to have happen. So core values should be aspirational rather than like here's how it is right here, right now.
I think it is all because we already thank you so much. We already planned it for 90 minutes and now it exceeds 50
Anh ơi, tiếng bị
minutes.
nhỏ em. Hỏi anh ơi, em.
Sorry. Hello? Hello? Sorry, can you hear me? Hi.
Yeah, your sound went out for some reason.
Okay, but now can you hear me?
Hơi nhỏ em ạ.
Okay, I have no idea how to fix this. Thank you for being here today, Catherine and everyone. We already planned it for 90 minutes and now it exists 15 minutes. Okay. So I know you are out of time. Mọi người ơi, mình cảm ơn mọi người đã tham gia buổi ngày hôm nay. Thì như lịch mà mình đã book với Catherine thì chỉ có 90 phút thôi và bây giờ đã quá 15 phút rồi. Để giữ cái sự chuyên nghiệp thì mình có thể cảm ơn Catherine và mình có thể hẹn những cái buổi sau. Em cũng sẽ gửi link LinkedIn của Catherine để mọi người có thể trực tiếp đặt câu hỏi tới cô, cũng như là khi mà mọi người test cái phần mà đánh giá common culture của mình thì mọi người cũng có thể trực tiếp reach out tới cô ạ. Hi Catherine. So okay. Yeah, thank you for this wonderful section together, and thank you for your insightful global perspective, and also with Duyên for your local wisdom to our community. And I think this is just the beginning for all of us. This is the first section, and please everyone accept my apology for this organizing, because this is the first time we have Catherine as the US speaker, and I did try my best to translate as fast as possible because we have so many things to share, but we have little time to listen. So, as I said, if you have any question, just reach out to Catherine's LinkedIn. I will share this as well. And yeah, thank you everyone for thank you.
Thank you so much for the insightful and inspiring sharing. I think the story and research remind us the workplace culture challenges are not unique to any country. Whether in the US, Europe, or Vietnam, we are all face similar struggle. We truly appreciate your contribution today. Thank you very much. And thank you all members in this webinar. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. And hopefully everybody got some good learning nuggets.
Thank you. See you next time.
All right. Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Have a nice day. Have a nice day ahead, Catherine. Thank you, Jenny, for supporting us.
Jenny, for your support.
Thank you so much too. Bye bye.
So for everyone still staying here, đối với các anh chị vẫn còn ở đây thì sau buổi ngày hôm nay, Học viện HR sẽ gửi một cái ebook bao gồm những thông tin, những cái framework hay là những kiến thức mà cô Catherine đã chia sẻ. Mình sẽ dịch sang tiếng Việt cho tất cả mọi người. Ở bên cạnh đó là những cái câu hỏi mà chưa được trả lời thì cũng sẽ được recap lại và sẽ trả lời lại ở trong phần ebook đó. Cùng với những cái framework.
Chị ơi, có thể share cái cuộc trò chuyện của mọi người hôm nay luôn được không ạ? Cái transcript của cái Zoom meeting đó chị. Tại vì mọi người discuss khá hay ấy. Nếu được thì
cái ebook đó để mọi người có đủ các cái câu trả lời. Ok. Bye mọi người. Chúc mọi người ngủ ngon.